welcome back. So one of the things I get asked a lot about is my divorce. And it seems like divorce is so increasingly more common nowadays. And I see a lot of couples getting stuck in the tit for tat, if you do it, I'll do it, or the constantly trying to get back at each other sort of mindset. You realize that in the beginning, there may be some sort of like really harsh and dark and negative energies going on between the spouses. But one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that if you were to approach the situation in a different manner, that the rest of the experience will pan out a lot smoother. I see a lot of courses and paid mentoring geared around this subject, but in all honesty, there is just one essential thing that you can absorb and keep in mind through your divorce process that will change your entire outlook on everything. So if this is something you're interested in learning about, then stick around. On the journey to divorce, I knew that I didn't want to approach things in the same old standard manner that most divorced couples end up going through. I wanted to be on the level where my spouse and I were pretty much working together to be able to fulfill our lives happily individually. That proved to be harder than expected. There was a lot of fighting and blaming and animosity towards each other, which luckily we were able to kind of step back and realize that that will never cease to see an end unless one or both of you come to the agreement to be a little more reasonable. The one thing that my spouse and I had in common was that we loved our child. Parenting our son was the number one concern in our life, and making sure that he was not affected negatively through our decision to separate was our main concern. Considering that the marriage was 11 years long, I can't sit here and say that there weren't emotional sides of the whole process. I'm not sure about him, but I know I went through a lot of emotional setbacks through the whole thing, and it wasn't because that I didn't know what I wanted. It was just the fact that a life I lived for 11 years was being shed, and a new life was being birthed. And that whole process, it takes time. So do always allow your time to process through your emotions and become aware of how you're feeling and why you're feeling that way. I have broke this down into 8 parts, and we'll end the video with my number 1 lesson learned through this whole darn crazy thing. And I hope by the end of this, you'll have a better outlook on your current situation if you are indeed going through a divorce. So first things first, keep it private. I know that the first thing you want to do when something crazy or chaotic happens in your life is to discuss it with somebody other than the party that you're working through things with. So you want to run, you want to tell your friends, you want to tell your family, you need to get it off your chest, you need to vent, and you want to hear advice, you want to hear how much the other person sucks and that you're right and they're wrong. But trust me, when you're starting out, just keep it between the two of you. My spouse and I were actually separated for months before anybody else knew, before any of our family knew. We had made the decision to put it out on the table, and we took 1 whole month to decide if that was what we really wanted. And in that month span, nothing changed. So I knew then and there that this was just what was going to happen. This is how the stars were aligned, and this is what was meant to happen in our lives. Now, after that month of nothing happening and it ended, and we sort of hit that barrier of the cutoff, then it was almost like some emotion started kicking in. I was kind of seeing different interactions from him, which were odd to me, but I understand that everybody processes everything differently. So set a time and make a decision. And whatever the decision is, at the end of that time, stick to it. Don't bobble back and forth between I'm done or, oh, maybe it'll work or we should give it another try. No, just be done. If you set a time, whether it's 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, whatever you pick, and nothing progressed in that time frame, then that is your sign that it's time to move on. Next up, cut off sexual contact. Do not keep having sex with the person you are divorcing. Even if you separate and move into different houses, do not hook back up. Stop yourself. This is something that you have to have control over. And honestly, it's probably the worst mistake of our whole thing was to agree on keeping to see each other in that sort of environment before we actually finally didn't live in the same household. That whole agreement ended up getting cut off very early because it was driving me crazy, because women do absorb sexual contact in a different manner. They absorb it with their emotions and their heart. So if you as a female are still having sexual contact with your spouse whom you've spent many of years with, even if they may have done you wrong or done something behind your back or cheated on you, you're still having sex with them. So you're still emotionally tied to them. Step, keep any conflict about the children away from the children. In all honesty, children are the ones that take the biggest hit in any divorce situation. Think about it. The two people they love the most right now in their lives are splitting up. My son is an only child, so we did a lot of things as a threesome. He really just spent a lot of time with his mom and dad together, and that was all of a sudden getting ripped from him. So we wanted to make sure that any approach we took or any disagreements we had were not discussed around him. Children need to be given the space to be able to remain children through the whole process. They don't need to be hearing about money conflicts, child support, this and that, dividing up material goods. Children do not need to see that. What we ended up doing was making one list of everything that was in the house, and we passed the list back and forth and signed our name to different things. Realize that doesn't work out for everyone, and if you kind of evaluate the situation and evaluate how the other person is willing to negotiate and work with you, you can strategize some sort of system to put in place to help figure out who gets what a lot easier than arguing about it. Next, forget about the why. Seriously, there is no drama without an audience. The only ones that are going to create drama in this whole situation is either one of you. So forget about the why. What's done is done. Put the past in the past and stay forward projecting. If you feel yourself getting ready to throw shade or place blame on your spouse for something that they did in the past, whether right or wrong, whether they really did it or didn't, just stop yourself, because all you're doing is just adding more chaos to your mindset, and it's not going to help you progress. Next up, consider their feelings. All right, that's the last thing you want to do when you're going through a divorce with somebody. But one thing to keep in mind is that this person came into your life for a reason, and they served a purpose. And at one time, you experienced some form of love for them, and In most cases, the person also experienced some form of love for you. Whether it was initial love, lust, sexual contact, marriage of convenience, there was something there that made that person agree to say, I do. Some things to think about in the way you can shift your perception through this whole thing without feeling bad or placing blame on yourself or the other person is to think, how did you show up for them through all that time? Ways that you may have contributed to the emotional conflict between the two of you. There are always two sides to every story. And yes, even though they may not be showing you how they feel, they could really be hurting on the inside. Even if you are divorcing a man or woman that might have some personality disorder traits, keeping their feelings into consideration allows for you to keep a form of love within the situation. And when there is love in the situation, then there is nothing for anybody to come back at you with. You hold that love in your heart space, then no lie or allegations will ever amount to anything because you're just over there la-di-da loving them, progressing forward, and just allowing yourself to be a little more free-flowing through the whole thing. Next step, don't be afraid to change the pattern. Your divorce does not have to look like everyone else's. Eventually, when you start expressing what's going on in your life to your outside environment, everybody's going to have an opinion. Everybody's going to want to say, you need to do this and you need to do that. But it's okay to set your own path. If you are financially stable on your own and your spouse is a wonderful parent, then why go for child support? What I'm saying is just evaluate your life circumstances. If you are able to bypass all those crazy legalities, then everything does tend to go a little bit easier. To be willing to put your ego aside and always consider the children if you have children in this case. I did not go for child support and the lawyer looked at me like I was crazy, but my son's father is a good dad and my son loves his dad. So I had to shift my perception and learn to love him through my son's eyes. So by loving him through my son's eyes, I would not want to witness any sort of struggles that would keep him from being able to provide as a father. If I was loving him through the eyes of an ex-wife, then I would have been like, yeah, you're paying, buddy. But I wouldn't want it done to me, so I didn't do it to him. Lastly, stay out of each other's personal lives. Communication between the two of you, post-divorce, after you've figured everything out, should only be about the children. And if you don't have any children, there's no need for any communication at all once you've been divorced. There may be instances where you are in the same room with each other with your child or children and you want to keep from having that awkward silence, so you find something to talk about. But other than that, stay out of each other's personal lives. You don't need to know what they're doing, where they're going, who they're with. Unless they eventually get into a relationship with somebody, then yes, you might want to know who that person is. You're only needing to communicate about your child and your children and anything involving or affecting their lives. Finally, the number one piece of advice I have for this whole thing is to remember that we are all on our own experience. If they cheated on you, I'm sorry that happened to you, but that's their experience. Let them live and loathe in their mistakes and move on with your life. Really, when somebody does something like that, it's not because of you. It's their own decision. It's their own choice. It's their own doing, falling under the category of living our own experience. If you are not meant to live in a joined experience with someone, all sorts of things will happen to get you to remove yourself from that situation. There were mistakes that I made in the marriage and things I did wrong and vice versa, But looking back, all that told me was that I wasn't getting what I needed or required internally and emotionally to be fulfilled in life from that situation. So when I ended that situation and allowed him to live his own experience however he sees fit, and allow myself to live my own experience however I see fit, then other doors started opening for me. Other people started coming into my life, and I found the love of my life. I could have stayed in a stale marriage that was constantly conflicted for the sake of us having a child together, for the sake of us being a family together, the whole society standard. But if I would have done that, I would not be living the life I am living right now. Sometimes we just have to sit back and realize that things aren't working out because they're not meant to work out. And that's just all there is to it. So don't take things personally. If somebody does you wrong, that was their experience. It has nothing to do with you. Something that hurts you, then it's probably best that you move on and find a happier experience. I hope this one was helpful for anybody that needed it. I know divorce and separation is rough and it's hard and it's emotional, but there are mindset shifts that you can take to help everything be a lot more smooth. Until next time, I hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye. So one final thing that came to mind as I was wrapping this video up is I just want to say that if you are in the situation where the person is telling lies about you or slandering you or trying to make you appear crazy or try to play like they're the victim, don't be afraid to defend yourself. But when you have to move into defending yourself, you don't want to be defensive. Sometimes you being defensive is exactly what the other person wants, because it's just like, oh, look, I told you all, she's crazy or he's crazy. I know it's hard to think about somebody out there talking negatively about you when you've put in 100% effort to make the relationship, accommodating and pleasing. But just realize that a lot of times, no matter what you do, that person is that person. They're not going to change. And there's nothing you can do about that. And it is the whole reason why you're no longer in that person's life. So try not to be defensive, but defend yourself with love, if that makes sense. Just allow them to go on and do their thing, and you live in love and live in balance, which means that there are no outside negative energies that can penetrate you to make you think anything other of yourself than pure positivity and love and light. I'll let you guys go for real this time. Bye.
Hey friends, don't forget to subscribe and click that bell for instant notifications. We can also be found on Facebook. Hit that thumbs up and check notification settings. Head on over to Instagram. We are there too, and I'm pleased to announce that we are now on Pinterest. Want to know a little more about me? Head on over to SOULDUCATE.com. Sign up for a hologram and get any upcoming updates right to your inbox. Are you interested in one-on-one services? Click the drop-down menu for more info on what I offer and how to book a free chat. In closing, always remember, you hold the power. No one can hold you back. Not the past, not the present, or the future, unless you allow it. Chapters will end, and every new chapter will demand a different, elevated version of you.